Welcome to the Get Over Yourself podcast. This is author and athlete Brad Kearns discovering ways to be healthy, fit, and happy in hectic, high-stress modern life. So let's slow down and take a deep breath, take a cold plunge, and expertly balance that competitive intensity with an appreciation of the journey. That's the theme of the show. Here we go.
I kind of get less excited about talking about lab numbers, and I'm more excited about what's actually happening to you. Did you gain 3 pounds of muscle? Did you put, 50 pounds on your deadlift? I mean, to me, that's what counts. How do you define someone's healthy? I think that's also a sort of a challenging topic because a lot of people will say, and a lot of physicians, in fact, and one of the problems with the healthcare industry is we've kind of diced and sliced people up based on numbers, and we stop looking and actually examining people. And, physicians have got 10 to 15 minutes to see people if they're lucky on some occasions, depending on, particularly if they're working in an employed model. So we've got all these sort of variables in there. So I like to look at what I suggest people look at are things that that are kind of more long-lasting. Things like a coronary artery calcium scan if you're over, say, 45 years of age.
Let's talk about ancestral supplements. If you're into ancestral health, primal paleo, keto, you know the importance of consuming these unique agents contained in bone marrow, in the nose-to-tail organ meats, liver, kidney, all that stuff, the great bone broth benefits. Well, how's it going? For me, since years ago when Dr. Kate Shanahan asserted the importance of these wonderful nutritional benefits that you can't get elsewhere, not too good. I don't know how to cook a liver or a kidney, but now your problems are solved forever when you go to ancestralsupplements.com, a wonderful company filled with people who are living the dream, walking their talk, and bottling up the purest, cleanest sources of grass-fed organ meats, kidney, liver, bone marrow, all in these wonderful capsules. I dump them in my smoothie every day. I'm healthy. I don't have to worry. It's an incredible dietary boost. And this is so different from swallowing a bunch of those synthetic vitamins and those giant bottles from the big box stores. Highly questionable health practice. This stuff is the real deal. Grass-fed organ meats, pure as can be. Ancestralsupplements.com. Dr. Shawn Baker dropping in on a beautiful sunny day in Southern California. This dude is living the dream, breaking world records, helping thousands of people heal with his beautiful program at meatrx.com and his new book, The Carnivore Diet. Get a load of this guy, people. You're going to enjoy this show. So simple, so straightforward. It's like, oh my gosh. How easy can it get? He changes his diet, alleviates all kinds of lifelong aches and pains that were developed from his long-term career as a high-contact sport athlete, and then goes out and busts these world records on the Concept 2 rower that everyone participates in. He's as good as the young guys, but the Masters world records are shattered by Shawn Baker, and he puts a lot of credit to changing his diet in recent years and performing better than ever beyond age 50. So shout out to the 50-plus category. Yes, dreams do come true, and you're going to really love his sensible, reasonable approach. Of course, everything is steeped in science with his medical background, and he's going to motivate and inspire you to at least give it a shot, especially if you're suffering from inflammatory or autoimmune conditions. And even if you're not and you just want to perform better, what a great conversation. Enjoy. Dr. Shawn Baker, author of The Carnivore Diet and purveyor of this wonderful community program that's dedicated to helping others at meatrx.com. Da-da-da-da. Sunny Southern California, looking at Saddleback Mountain. So glad to connect in person with Dr. Shawn Baker. How you doing, man?
Yeah, Brad, I'm doing well. Thanks for coming out. Yeah, it's good to see you in person as well.
You're a busy guy. I don't do much social media, but I find you on Instagram once in a while. And you know how those videos run on a loop on Instagram? So you watch through and then it starts over and you don't know. And so I saw you doing the squats, the 405-pound squats, and I thought it was just a loop. Like you did, a few reps and then it loops back and then it loops back. But you were doing 20 reps of how much weight on that squat bar?
Yeah, I can't remember the last. I think I did 405 for 20. That was something. I mean, these were high box squats, so it was fairly relatively light. But
that's relatively light.
Well, from what I'm used to doing, I was doing, a couple of weeks ago I was doing 520 pounds. So yeah, I do a lot of. I tend to do higher rep stuff. That seems to work well for me.
You're in the 50 plus category.
I turned 53 a couple days ago. So yeah, I'm
thumbs up to the 50 plus.
50 plus.
Yeah. And on a serious note, you're walking your talk. So you're talking about this crazy diet that the average person will find a quick pop off for. Everyone's begging me to watch this new movie where people are performing amazing athletic feats because of this special diet. And then here you are doing 20 reps of a 405-pound squat bar at over 50 years old. That's got to be up there in the record levels. But I do want to ask you about your rowing record and your athletic exploits here at this age, because something's working, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't just wake up one day, start eating meat, and turn to a phenomenal athlete. I mean,
I thought that was just because of the meat. Okay.
No, I mean, I've been training my whole life.
Oh, he's been training. Okay.
Yeah, and so I've been doing that for years and years. But I mean, the unique thing I think for me is, as you get older, you kind of see a gradual decline in performance. And when I turned 50 and I adopted an all-meat diet, I actually saw an increase in performance, which I thought was pretty good. And I started to kind of rival things I could do in my early 40s and late 30s, which, again, it's pretty cool when you're 50 plus. And I don't take hormones or drugs or anything like that. And so I have to attribute it to the diet, because that's the only thing I really changed. My training has not changed significantly in the philosophy that I do. And so I've been, over the years, I cycled through, I think I started out, kind of weightlifting, and then I played high-level rugby in New Zealand and throughout the United States on a bunch of select teams playing for the military. And then I kind of transitioned back into powerlifting for a while, where I got to where I was, reasonable. I got close to an 800-pound deadlift as a drug-free athlete back in my early 30s, and then I played with some of the strongman stuff for a while, and then we had the first ever national strongman championships. I think I was fifth in the heavyweight class, again as a drug-free athlete. And then I kind of realized that without me taking drugs, I didn't think I could succeed in strongman, unfortunately. And so after that, I think I transitioned into throwing stuff. So I got into the Highland Games. And that's where you put on a kilt and you throw these big cabers and you throw these 56-pound weights with one arm, and hammers and stones, shot putting, and I ended up winning the national and then the world championships, again, in the masters category in that sport. And then, that required me to be 280, 290 pounds to have the leverages to compete with people who were even bigger, 6'9", 350-pound guys. And I'm just a little guy at 6'5", 280, right? And then, when I got to about, early 40s, all that being really big and focusing only on strength training really started to catch up on me. And my diet wasn't where it probably needed to be. And so then I kind of cleaned up the diet and went through a whole progression of different diets, ending up on this crazy meat diet. I took up rowing a little bit before that, ended up on this Concept 2, which people who do CrossFit or obviously rowers are very familiar with. There's it's sort of a competitive circuit where there's, tens and thousands of people that enter every year and enter their times. And there's actually a world championship, which I won last year, which was here in Long Beach. And I'm actually going to Paris in a couple of weeks to compete, to hopefully defend my title in the 500-meter category. And so I set, I think in my late 40s and early 50s, I set 6 American records in various distances. And then I set 3 world records, and I've got 1 world championship. And then hopefully, knock on wood, I'll have another one, in a couple of weeks. So
the Concept 2 is the calibrated machine you see in all the health clubs. So anyone, anywhere in the world can throw down a time.
Right.
And I suppose video it and it's complete proof that you're on the same machine doing the same thing.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to verify it. There's an actual internal code that the machine will give you to show you that that time you do is valid, and that's how they validate them. There's a lot. There's a lot of ways to verify that, but that's how it is uniquely interesting because you can do it anywhere in the world, and the machine will give you the same result.
No excuses in Paris. Oh, the
right,
machines were all
right. And usually in these contests, they give you brand new machines, which is really nice because you actually can get a little better time on a brand new machine typically because the bungee cord in there kind of stretches out over time. Mine's probably all stretched out because I beat on that thing every single day, pretty hard. But yeah, it's a pretty good test of fitness for sure, and then in the faster distance, strength becomes a role. Has a big role in that.
Well, these are very short duration efforts, right?
Well, I mean, the 500 meter, my best time's a minute 14, so that would be a relatively short, distance. The Olympic distance that most rowers compete at is 2,000 meters, which, the top guys are doing that under 6 minutes, and that's that's a pretty challenging thing to do. I probably will move on to that 2,000 meter maybe next year when I kind of get tired of focusing on the 500 meter, and hopefully I'll be the first person under 50 to break 6 minutes. I think I can do that. So that would be, I think, a pretty good, demonstration of fitness, but also a testament to diet.
Okay, so you were doing these power events for many years. And cycling through different kinds of diet, were you kind of a high experimental guy where you went extreme into this, extreme into that? Or what was that dietary journey like that landed you on your current pattern?
Well, I mean, for most of my athletic career, it was just eat enough because in strength sports, being big requires you to eat a heck of a lot. And I didn't, I ate a lot of what we would consider healthy food, but I certainly ate a lot of calories and I ate a lot of food that, I didn't skip dessert all the time. I would have it from time to time. And so, but yeah, as I went on the dietary journey, it started with, as a physician, I said, well, I mean, you got to eat less and you got to move more. And I did that. And I did that to the extreme. I mean, to the point where I was training 3 times a day, even as a busy surgeon. I would get up early in the morning and I would jump rope. I'd do maybe a couple thousand jump rope skips. And then over my lunch hour on the days I had the capacity to do that, I'd train, lifting weights very intensely. And then I go home in the evening, put my kids to bed and then jump rope again, another couple thousand skips. And then I dramatically dropped my caloric intake. And not surprisingly, I lost a bunch of weight. I went from 280 to like 230 in 3 months. I mean, I got really lean, and the nurses didn't like me anymore because I was a bit of an ass.
Yeah. The cranky weight loss program.
Right. So I was doing that, and then I just kind of realized I couldn't sustain it. And then I kind of started shifting over to a paleo, primal type of approach. Did that for a while. Really enjoyed it. Did all the cooking and the recipes, and kind of read more and more, and kind of fell in line with some of the low carb thought by reading a lot of the material and experimented with that. We did a ketogenic diet for about 2.5 years or so, and then I kind of sort of stumbled on these kind of crazy people doing this all meat diet, and I just kind of spent about 6 months to a year kind of like this. Wow, that's interesting, and following these people and reading about
just thinking about it though.
Right, thinking about it. And then I would do like a couple days, I do steak and eggs for 3 or 4 days, and I actually felt pretty good, and I liked it, I enjoyed it. And then I kind of I got enough bravery to do it for a week, and then 2 weeks, and then finally in 2016 I did it for a 30-day stretch. And at that time I had a reasonable social media following, enough to where people were kind of interested. And
what were you doing before that?
I was in a ketogenic type diet.
Okay, yeah, you're
so
just
promoting. Not far off, right? And so I did it, and we kind of joked around. I listed a poll: what am I going to die of in these 30 days? Am I going to get scurvy? Am I going to get heart disease? Is my colon going to fall out from lack of fiber? And obviously none of that happened. And, it was kind of, what initially started out as just an experiment, as a joke. I really had a profound, objective improvement in my health. And so then when the 30 days were over, I went back to that kind of ketogenic style diet with, a wider variety of food, the things I thought I'd miss, and I ate them, and I had, a whole variety of things. And I was like, the next day I was like, man, I don't feel this good. Something doesn't feel as good.
From whatever, adding salads or nuts or whatever
it was. I added a bunch of food. I couldn't tell you exactly what it was. And then I said, well, all things being equal, I really am not so concerned about high fat. I'm not worried about having a heart attack, because I think there's a lot of context that goes around cholesterol that we have to be more nuanced about it. And so I went back to the all meat diet and continued to feel great. And then all of a sudden I'm breaking world records on the rowing machine. Doing well, all the aches and pains that I had accumulated over the 50 years of my life went away, and I'm just this is a good way for me to feel. And so now I'm 3+ years later into this and still doing quite well.
That's quite early back in 2016. I mean, what was going on at that point? I know the bodybuilders have been playing with this since the 70s, where they'd cut up for the contest eating only steak and eggs, but it seems like the public's only become aware of the carnivore diet in the past 12 months or some number like that.
Yeah, I mean, it even goes farther back. You can go back to Vince Carone, even farther back, with athletes using steak and eggs and steak as a main part of their diet. So this goes back quite a few years ago. Yeah, I mean, I guess there had been people in the background, a kind of a small group, maybe several thousand people that had collected on a social media platform that I kind of stumbled across. And so it was pretty quiet. Obviously, I mean, we could argue that there's societies that have done pretty much meat-based diet for forever, basically. But as far as mainstream, Western culture, this is kind of unique. And partly, it was kind of interesting because I ended up going to Joe Rogan's podcast because for whatever reason, he found out about me, thought it was crazy enough to put him on the show and unique. And that, I think, probably, brought it to a lot of people's attention. And then I think Michaela Peterson sort of was inspired by that, and Jordan Peterson, and then that kind of, and that brought it further into the public's eye. And of course, I've been a pretty vocal proponent of people trying it. Not that I think this is the only thing people should do, and I'm not very dogmatic about it, but I think it does seem to be very effective.
It's no big deal. It's just the attribution for my world records at age 50 plus. Yeah, I mean, I like your style because you are definitely agreeable and not super negative or attacking the other points of view. But again, this thing is now turning into something that's kind of ridiculous, where the propaganda that's being thrown in our faces, I feel like it's maybe you're going to have to get... we're all going to have to get a little more resilient or something.
Well, I mean, I would say that I am certainly not going to say that everybody has to do this, needs to do this. This is the best thing for all people. But I think for many people, particularly people struggling with health conditions, and even though I'm an athlete and I'm enjoying the fruits of the diet in my personal experience, I'm really concerned with these people that have all these chronic medical conditions as a physician. And that's where I'm really excited about the utility of this. Now, you are right, and I wouldn't say that I don't criticize, because I have been very critical of the plant-based sort of, thought that is the ultimate thing that we all need to be doing. And I do see that this is probably being driven mostly by, financial interests, particularly people that want us to sort of transition over to this. I like to call it human pet food, but it's basically highly processed, it's highly processed plant-based foods. These alternate protein sources, these quote unquote faux meats. And I think that is what I think we really have to push back against, because they're trying to scapegoat, cows as destroying the planet, using very sort of a lot of misinformation, quite honestly, and they're sort of distorting the impact. Not that there's no impact, but they're sort of trying to, the people that are really, I think, behind this are the people that stand to make a lot of money in the alternative meats market, with, it's projected to be $100 billion industry. And so they're laying a lot of information in there, and it's being pushed through the media, and it's being propped up very aggressively.
So you talk about having these aches and pains from lifelong athletic journey, especially contact sports. I can't even imagine. We know that the NFL players are walking around virtually crippled. I've seen Jim Otto. He comes to the takeout in the town I used to live in, and he's put together by string and gum right now. These poor guys. But then miraculously, you're saying these major aches and pains, you'd noticed a significant alleviation?
Yeah, I mean, from my personal experience, yeah, I mean, any sort of tendonitis, sore, achy joint, basically went away from me. And it's pretty much been that way since that time, with rare exception. And what I saw, even on a ketogenic diet, when I was doing orthopedics, is I saw patients that I needed them to lose weight for surgery. And, a ketogenic diet was what I was asking them to do, because I found it to be more effective for most people. And what I was seeing, even in absence of weight loss for these people, is their joint pain would go away. And
while they were losing weight, then they come in and say, "Hey, my knee doesn't hurt anymore. I don't need surgery."
Exactly, and that has some negative implications for revenue for the hospital, unfortunately. But
imagine that.
Yeah,
Dr. Baker told me to lose 50 pounds, and now
I don't need my surgery anymore. Yeah, so that was I think that was one of the early sort of light switches for me. They turned on. I said, wait a minute, there's something going on here besides wear and tear, because the orthopedic model, particularly for osteoarthritis, is just mechanical. It's just wear and tear. And I think there's a huge biologic component and inflammatory component that we are now starting to, see that. But I mean, even in, addition to what I was seeing on a ketogenic diet, with a purely meat-based diet, this was even amplified. This was, people that still had some aches and pains like I did when I was on a ketogenic diet, when I went on the meat-based diet. Even the last little vestiges of that went away, which I think was really cool. And I am seeing, almost daily now, as my social media has gotten, quite honestly, out of hand. I've got so many people that I have following me, and it's every day I see literally people whose chronic back pain went away, their chronic knee pain went away. They cancel joint replacement surgeries. That's occurring. Just it's very common now.
So, from your scientific medical background, what the heck's going on when you're switching over to this, what's still perceived as a fringe radical diet?
So, from what we are starting to understand, I think there is, with regard to what's going on with a meat-based diet, we're seeing more and more diseases that seem to have a origin in the gut. And, we know that there is significant evidence out there that going on meat-based diet seems to help with gut permeability. That is to say, it restores a normal permeability rather than the excess permeability, the so-called leaky gut syndrome.
Is it restoring it due to the agents in the meat, or is it because you're eliminating the plant foods?
I think it's mostly the removal of the irritating foods. I think that's what's occurring, and this is based on the work of Dr. Chofia Clemens and Chabato That in Hungary, where they're doing a lot of intestinal permeability testing. They're using something called PEG 400, which is polyethylene glycol, and they're comparing foods in the diet and what happens with gastrointestinal permeability, and they're seeing clearly that certain foods increase it, whereas when you remove those foods, it normalizes. So the tight junctions tend to improve. We see at the same time that occurs, inflammatory markers decrease, and then clinical symptoms follow shortly after that. So it's probably, that's one aspect of it. I think there's, more chronically, things like advanced glycation end products, which occur when we have this sort of, insulin dysregulation and up and down glucose. Probably there's some problem with oxidized, lipids as well. Some of these seed oils that we're consuming.
Oh, right. When you go to a carnivore diet, you're cutting out a lot of processed carbs. Imagine that.
Yeah, you're cutting out all the junk. I mean, it's hard to make a carnivore diet with junk food. I mean, it's just pretty darn hard.
You could get,
to do.
I don't know.
I mean, maybe some of the sausages,
nitrate-laden processed meat or something.
Some of that stuff, if it's got a lot of garbage in there, you might. But I mean, for the most part, it's a really good way to get rid of that stuff. Because even on, as I'm sure you're aware, even any new diet that comes around, paleo, vegan, primal, keto, they get all the junk food. And just, we get all the junk food products. It's because they want to make the buck on it, and they're really scratching their head how to do it on carnivore. They're going, how the heck can we make carnivore junk food or processed food? And, we're seeing a few attempts, but I don't think it's going to be, have much of a significant effect. So it's really a pretty pure diet for the most part. It's hard to do that diet with anything that's got that stuff in there. So I think that's the main improvement. If we look at even these longevity countries, I think more than anything, whether it's plant-based or meat-based, it's absence of junk-based, and I think that's the biggest thing we're seeing. When you look, whether you look at blue zones or other long-lived countries, whether it's Iceland or Japan or Hong Kong or Monaco, a lot of those countries have wealth also as a confounder there. But it tends to be get the crap out of your diet, eat whole foods, whether it's meat or plants, that seems to be a pretty good strategy. In my view, obviously, I'm biased toward the meat side of it.
Well, you made an important point, too, because we're getting bombarded with all the propaganda and forced to maybe take sides or, start to formulate some limiting beliefs about the direct association with this particular superfood or dietary strategy. You had a great quote on your Instagram. I think it was your Welcome to 2020 message. You said, it's impossible to study diet and conclude that it will make you live longer. I guess because of so many confounding factors.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. I mean, if we look at nutrition science in general, I mean, it's just basically poor science. I mean, and it's not because it's any of the fault of the scientists. It's too hard to realistically do. I mean, you can't really do a study where you kill all the people at the end of the study and cut them open and say what happened. So because we can't do that and we're constrained by ethics, the studies that would have to be done are, basically twin studies locked in metabolic wards for 50 years, controlling every variable and varying the diet. And
short of that, we got flaws coming into the picture.
And there's people that will argue, well, it's the best we can do, and therefore we need to accept those outcomes. And I look at it a different way. I said, if you've got really bad data, you just have to accept this really bad data and you can't draw the conclusions. And I think that's along the lines of people like Professor Gordon Guyatt, who is, the person who actually invented evidence-based medicine. This is, he's from McMaster University in Canada. He's in the Canadian Medical Hall of Fame. He's one of the most cited researchers of all time. His whole career has been evaluating evidence. And I interviewed him, and he said, "Look, we don't have evidence to make nutritional guidelines. There is nothing, there's nothing out there that we can say that."
What does he know?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's a guy.
He's only spent his whole career.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly, and people will, discount that. And again, he's one of the guys that sat on the Nutrirex committee who basically came out recently and said there's no strong evidence to suggest that red meat causes colorectal cancer, heart disease, or anything else. And they criticized him because he applied a more rigorous evaluation tool to look at the evidence, and it's saying, well, we should just be able to use really weak criteria to say what we do. And I think, well, maybe he has it right. Maybe we should use actual, strong level of criteria before we make these big sweeping proclamations that are going to affect, billions of people's lives. I mean, maybe we should really have a strong evidence before we make those decisions.
The industrial seed oil controversy of, I think that was in the 60s with the McGovern Council and, making legislation for the United States for decades to come. And it was now being exposed as, complete manipulation and profit seeking and special interests. And, we were told to get rid of butter and eat margarine in the late 60s, early 70s. And it's that these things are still hanging on to conventional wisdom today.
Yeah, I think it was 77 that McGovern had that panel. He basically says, I don't have time for the science. I got to make a decision now. And I mean, that's that obviously that decision has arguably hurt, countless millions of people's lives. But, if we look at just, basic in-your-face type of things, when we look at red meat, for instance, back in 1976, the U.S. peaked in its meat consumption. We were consuming around 96 pounds of meat, red meat, beef per capita. And now in 2020, we consume about 56 pounds. So we've got like a 35-40% reduction in red meat consumption in the last 50 years or so. And yet we're fatter, we're sicker, we have more diabetes, we have more, cancers, we have more autoimmune disease. And so it's kind of like hard for me to buy into red meat is causing these things when we eat less of it. And we're sicker. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
What's the corresponding curve for sugar there from 19?
Yeah, so sugar is pretty interesting. Sugar has gone up. It's kind of gone down in the last 10 or 15 years, and so maybe there's a threshold level. But probably the more telling curve is probably that seed oil curve. And so when we look at soybean oil consumption, currently soybean oil is the amount of calories we get from soybean oil is equal to or exceeds the amount of calories we get from beef currently, which is a shocking fact. That is something you think about, that we're getting more calories from soybean oil than we do from beef these days, which is, in my view, a little bit scary. And I think that's something that, another thing you'd like to pin, you could potentially say, well, this at least hypothetically makes sense. Whereas the other, beef going down, disease going up, it becomes harder to make that argument. The same thing can be said about, if we want to go into the environmental side of it, atmospheric methane has been on the rise for the last 20 to 30 years, but guess what? World cattle population has declined by 100 million cattle in the last 30, 40 years.
Wow.
So we're seeing a decrease in our cattle population, yet an increase in our methane. And when they actually look at it, when they do a top-down assessment and they go up in the atmosphere and they sample the methane concentration, and they look at the special isotopic signatures, they can say this methane come from here, it came from here. And the bottom line is it's not coming from the cattle. It's coming from, perhaps natural gas leaks through things like fracking. It's coming from hydroelectric power. It's coming from rice fields. It's coming from wetlands leaks, but it's not coming from cattle. So this whole sort of argument is not grounded in any significant amount of, real hard data. It's more ideology. It's propaganda. It is designed to prop up this, like we talked about, this $100 billion alternate protein industry.
Okay, so if we're making progress here with the acknowledgement that the science is imperfect and the headline story that you read might be anywhere from complete bullshit and manipulative to just basically inaccurate. So where would we go to doing a personal blood profile before and after a 30-day experiment, especially if you're suffering from any kind of health condition or even aches and pains?
Yeah, I mean, how do you define someone's healthy? I think that's also sort of a challenging topic because a lot of people will say, and a lot of physicians, in fact, and one of the problems with the healthcare industry is we've kind of diced and sliced people up based on numbers, and we stop looking and actually examining people. And, physicians, they've got 10 to 15 minutes to see people if they're lucky on some occasions, depending on, particularly if they're working in an employed model. And, much of that time is spent doing coding, doing billing, meeting your EMR, electronic medical records requirements. So you have very little time for the patient. So you do what's most expeditious, which is, we'll do a lab, and then if the lab is a certain value, we'll try to fix that. We'll treat that lab value. Whether that's actually making you better or not is debatable, but the way we treat that lab value more often than not is a prescription medication, and that's what we're trying to do. So when I want to ask if we threw out all lab values and we wanted to tell people, are you healthy or not? Most people could tell you. I mean, they could say, I feel like garbage. I'm tired. I'm depressed. I got a big beer belly. My sex life is awful. My joints hurt. My digestion's awful. You take those people and you reverse all that stuff, and all of a sudden they're lean and they're happy and they feel 20 years younger and everything works. I would argue that person has gotten healthier.
Something's working,
regardless of what the lab values say.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's a commonsensical argument that I think is hard to refute. Although there are people that, in the face of that, and we have doctors that will see someone come in and every objective clinical thing you could look at says they're better, and yet perhaps maybe their cholesterol went up a bit. And all of a sudden, oh my gosh, you're on the road for a heart attack.
Here's some statins, yeah.
Here's some statins, you're on the road for a heart attack. Stop whatever you're doing. Stop eating meat. Go on this low-fat, flavored cardboard diet, and live miserably, right? And this is what we have out there because we've been so brainwashed to think that cholesterol is the devil and the enemy. And I think there's, I think when we look at it, there's nuance. Most of Americans are, obese. They are overweight. They are metabolically unhealthy in that situation. Elevated cholesterol is probably, more of a problem. But when we start getting nuance and we look at people like perhaps myself or yourself, who is not metabolically inflamed, that is lean, that is active, that probably all the other numbers we might want to look at are in good position, then that cholesterol might not quite have the same impact. And I think that's sort of the disconnect. And it takes a physician or a healthcare provider that's willing to spend a little more time to look at the overall package. But again, we have a system that doesn't really foster that. There's no incentive to do that. It's, 90% of you guys are sick anyway, here's a statin, and if 10% have to suffer because of that, we're not going to worry about that. But like I said, when I look at, how would I assess someone's healthy? First of all, I would ask them subjectively. I think that's very important. I think that's what people really want. I mean, how are you doing? because I get people send me their labs all the time, and I don't really care. I'm like, what's going on with you?
Yeah. Are you happy?
Are you happy? Are you doing better? And most of the time, yeah, I feel great. I lost all this weight. I'm lean.
Yeah.
Nothing hurts. What about this lab and that lab? Well, first of all, these reference ranges were established on basically 6 standard American diet people. That's one thing we have to realize.
All the reference pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much. And we also have to realize that these labs, you can take a lab today and take it tomorrow, and very likely those numbers aren't going to match. So there's a lot of day-to-day variability between lab numbers. There's also a lot of diurnal variation. So, for instance, vitamin D, if you take it first thing in the morning, it's going to be low. You take it afternoon, it's going to be higher.
Wow.
Most people don't know that, and they get all hung up on, oh my God, my vitamin D's low, I need to supplement. And when you could have said, well, maybe you should have just taken your lab 2 hours later and you've been normal. So we've got all these sort of variables in there. So I like to look at what I suggest people look at are things that that are kind of more long lasting. Things like a coronary artery calcium scan if you're over, say, 45 years of age. That has some sort of meaning to me as far as what's going on chronically with you. Alternatively, a carotid intermedial thickness test. It kind of shows you any sort of atherosclerotic disease or potential for that, or inflammation in the vessels. That's something helpful. You can look at visceral fat. We can get a liver ulcer sound, or that would be more. Or
an Instagram photo, either one.
Well, there's some correlation for that. If you got a big beer belly, you probably got visceral fat. If you got a 6-pack, you're probably likely to have visceral fat. I know people don't like to say that. Well, just because there's a fit guy that once died. Yeah, that's the exception. Most people that are lean are in better cardiometabolic health than people that are obese. That's not controversial, but people always like to point out the exceptions. And then, I think things like, waist to height ratio, which we talked about, VO2 max, lean muscle mass, your capacity to do things are important. I think those things, to me, are better indicators of health than some of these labs we can get. Particularly the labs that are transient, that can go up and down. Imaging can be helpful. Ultimately, if you really want to look at something, you would biopsy it. But that's not practical and it's painful. So we don't typically want to do that. Blood is very easy to get, but it probably provides us a lot less information than other ways we could get.
Than we think.
Right.
Yeah, you wrote a great article on your website about testosterone. I'm curious to talk more about that, because I'd love to have great markers that I'm delaying the aging process as well as possible. And I think your commentary was about how you were performing well in all areas of life, but your number was in the low range, maybe because of your low insulin production, and that's throwing off the results. Or talk more about that.
Yeah, so we can look again. Once again, this becomes the difference between a lab number and clinical function. I think if you want to look at, for a male, if you want to look at, is my testosterone working? I would ask yourself, are you waking up with an erection every day? That's probably a pretty good clinical marker, right? We want to see that. We also want to see the other clinical markers of testosterone function. Maintain lean muscle mass. Mood and cognition. Sexual function, libido in general. Those things all indicate healthy testosterone. So when we look at the lab numbers, there's total testosterone, free testosterone, that which is bound to sex hormone, binding globulin, and then also importantly, most people are starting to come to learn a little about this, is the androgen receptor itself. And now we have drugs called selective androgen receptor modulators that people are manipulating. These bodybuilders are trying to manipulate so they can express or make more efficient those androgen receptors, because it's a lock and key model. If you have a lot of testosterone floating around, but you have very low receptors, you're going to be limited on what your clinical effect is. Conversely, if you have a lot of receptors and an equal amount of testosterone, you're going to get the most sort of bang for your buck. It has to pair up. We know that the receptor can be increased by strength training. There's some evidence that infrequent meals or fasting can help with that. There's some evidence that carnitine, which is found pretty much exclusively in meat, particularly red meat, also can upregulate that androgen receptor. And so we also know that there's, again, diurnal variable in your testosterone. What time of day did you take it? Did you take it first thing in the morning at 5 a.m. when your testosterone's at its peak, or did you take it at noon when it's a lot lower? And so did you have a hard workout? In the days before, that can drive down. We see athletes that are getting really lean and training really hard, their testosterone tanks. And so you know, all those things play a factor in what your 1 minute testosterone. So I had my testosterone drawn. It was low. It was low. Everybody's like, well, you've got the testosterone of a grandmother. Why would I listen to you? And yet here I am repping 500 pounds of deadlift as a drug-free athlete. I'm like, look, there's more to it than just what a transient number. In fact, I took it a week later and it was 100 points higher. And I just didn't make a big deal of that because I know there's day-to-day variation. There was an interesting study that Stu Phillips put out in 2018. I don't know if you're familiar with Professor Stu Phillips, but he's one of the leading muscle protein synthesis researchers, protein researchers in the world. And they did a study looking at, college-age athletes that were doing resistance training. And they assayed, how much free testosterone, how much, bound testosterone, total testosterone, a number of other hormone markers. And they looked at the androgen receptor as well. And the only thing that correlated to muscle growth was the androgen receptor. Didn't matter how much testosterone they had, how little. It was all about the androgen receptor. And so in a natural athlete, it seems to be more the receptor than anything else that dictates muscle growth and arguably other clinical functions. So I think it's just more nuance to what we know. And the exception to that is because we know testosterone can stimulate the androgen receptor, but that usually is in the presence of exogenous testosterone. So guys are, hitting the needle and pumping up with steroids. That's why they turn into giants, right? They get this, we get a lot of the expression of androgens in our traps and shoulders, and you can see a bodybuilder that they just swell up in their traps like crazy, and you see this kind of typical pattern. That's the effect of exogenous testosterone, but normal endogenously produced testosterone within the normal range really doesn't have that much difference, with regard to muscle synthesis, relative to what the androgen receptor can do.
Can you test for the androgen receptor levels?
Yeah, with a biopsy. That's the problem.
Oh, just a biopsy.
Yeah, I don't know if there might be like an antigen labeled test, but it's probably very expensive. But I know the way I think they did in that research, they biopsied everybody. So it's not convenient.
So testing the free T, you have the serum T level, and then you have the free T.
Right.
Is that going to give a hint that your receptors are working well, or is that sort of?
Well, no, I think the best hint is clinical function. I mean, honestly, that's where the rubber meets the road. I mean, like I said, your free test. There are people with very high free testosterone that have horrible clinical function. Conversely, there are people, including very, very prominent, very strong athletes that have low testosterone levels that are doing very well. So, I mean, I think that's the ultimate test. That's what we care about at the end of the day. So, again, I kind of get less excited about talking about lab numbers, and I'm more excited about what's actually happening to you. Did you gain 3 pounds of muscle? Did you put, 50 pounds on your deadlift? I mean, to me, that's what counts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Cooper Institute and University of Texas, the study of the 1 mile run at age 50, they said that was the number one longevity marker, better than any blood value, is how well you can perform at that age is highly predictive of your ability to survive till age 85 in good shape. And they have the time thresholds, and there's also a push-up test that's strongly correlated with longevity. So
yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. I think that, the Honolulu longevity study where they looked at people and they said the ones that were the strongest in midlife were the ones that had like a 250% likelihood of making it to 100 years. And so we see this over, and I kind of make up this, not the 1 mile because I don't want to run a mile. I'm just kidding, but
neither do I. It's painful.
Yeah, I mean, an all-out mile is painful for sure.
Yeah.
But I look at the 100-meter dash. I just kind of arbitrarily said, if we lined up, 50 people of various ages and said, you guys run 100 meters, and everybody that could run it under 15 seconds, I would say you guys are going to live longer than the guys that are going to run it over. And what would happen is a lot of people that are in the 15+ category would be old guys, right? The younger guys would do it. And
I see. So all other things being...
Right, all other things being equal. And the people that are more likely to die sooner are going to be in the latter half. Many of it because they're aged, but also the people that can't run 100 meters in 15 seconds, either they're too damn fat, they have not enough strength to propel their body. They don't have even the cardiovascular capacity. They don't have the flexibility. Or they don't have the joint function. Maybe they've got these injuries and stuff like that. And so if you can get into that, and the reason I chose 15 seconds is because the world record for the 85+ category is 15 seconds.
It is?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah, well, last time I looked it up, it was right
I
around
thought it
50.
was. I remember I was trying to get my dad out there because when he was 95, he was in good shape. He made it till 97, but I thought he might have a shot at the record. And it was like 28 seconds for
Yeah,
the 95 plus.
but I'm talking about 85. So there's
15.
15.
That is
Yeah,
fast.
there's like a 15.
People have no idea.
Right, that's pretty fast.
That's
So
moving.
there's an 85-year-old that's done. So I said, if there's an 85-year-old dude that can run it at 15,
There you go.
I sure as hell can. Should be able to.
Yeah,
Now, I
hope
haven't
so.
tested in a few years. Last time I checked, I was 12 something. So
Wow.
I'm still not bad for an old guy.
That's explosive. Yeah, I mean,
I do a lot of explosive training. But
Yeah.
so that's my sort of criteria. So if I can,
I like
so
it.
if there's a 40-year-old that runs it in 16 and I'm 50 and I can run it in 14, then I'm going to outlive that 40-year-old. That's my thought.
Well, I mean, this concept of biological age is now strongly validated. And I remember Jack LaLanne, the best example of all.
Right.
When he was 43, he set the world record of doing 1,000 push-ups and 1,000 pull-ups in an hour 22 minutes, obviously alternating back and forth. But that's off the charts for any human of any age.
Absolutely,
so his
yeah.
biological age, you can peg it wherever you want, 21, and it's literally true on so many levels.
Yeah, I mean, Jack LaLanne was obviously ahead of his time by quite a bit. He was kind of an icon. And honestly, on my birthday, I do something. He always did something crazy on his birthday. And so I've sort of last decade or so, every year when I turn a year older, I do something. So this year, I mean, it was kind of weak because I was traveling. I was in a hotel, and I was like, I turned 53, so I'm going to do 530 push-ups. So that's what I did for my birthday, and
So what kind of sets would that?
I was just, I was actually speaking at a talk. It was kind of funny. I would go behind
sweaty guy comes down.
I would go behind a curtain and do 20 push-ups. And
so you had to do them throughout the day.
Yeah, I was doing them throughout the day.
Gosh.
So people were watching me at the kind of, what the hell is that guy doing? He's going behind his curtain every 10, 15 minutes. He's going off doing push-ups. And, so that's what because I was speaking that day.
Yeah.
I was at one of these keto events. And so, but I mean, I think the worst one I did was when I turned 46. I did 4,600 jump ropes, and that was. And it took me about an hour to do that. And that's something
Wow.
I said, I don't want to do this one again.
Okay, we'll pick something else every year.
Yeah,
We'll broaden the abilities.
Yeah, when I turned 44, I deadlifted 700 pounds. That was my sort of goal for 44. But it varies from year to year.
So, are there any concessions that you're giving right now to your age? Do you train differently or have longer recovery times?
Not really. The only concession is I've gotten busy, and so busy that it's harder to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
But physically, I feel like I can continue to train just as hard as I always could if I didn't have the time limitation. So I've been very focused on maximizing my time in the gym. Everything is done. I don't do a lot of screwing around. I mean, it's get it done. I go pretty hard. I don't tend to train a lot of volume or a lot of time, just because more than anything, it's a time constraint type of issue for me. But I if I have the time to train, I train just like I did when I was 20.
So let's say you did have the time. Would you engage in these prolonged workouts, or do you kind of favor the more short, intense?
It would depend on my short-term goal. Is what I'm doing. Like so, as I get ready for these rowing contests, everything is focused to that, and so it for me it works better with the short, intense type stuff. But I think that if my goal and I kind of have an overarching goal of what I want to maintain as I get older. I want to maintain muscle mass. I want to maintain strength. I want to maintain my ability to be explosive. To jump, to sprint, to throw. And I want to maintain some conditioning. And so I try to include some element of all of those throughout the week. It'll vary how much I do one versus the other depending on, the time of the year and what my goals are. But those are the things I continue to do. If I want to put on a lot of muscle mass, then I'm going to train a little bit longer with a little more volume. I've responded better to that. I know there's people that like to do the HIIT style training where it's one set, once a week, and I never responded very well to that. I whether it's psychologically or physically, I like a little more volume. I mean, that's what I've enjoyed, and I've had success with that and arguably I think pretty decent success for 40 plus years now of training. And so, if I've got unlimited time, I'll go to the gym and do. It's not going to be 3 hours. I'm not going to spend 3 hours in the gym. But I mean, for me, a long workout would be anything over an hour. Hour and 15 minutes, and I'm like, that's all I need to do.
And what kind of stuff are you doing?
Well, again, for the rowing stuff, obviously it's rowing. For The explosivity stuff, I'll do a lot of like post-activation potentiation stuff where I'll do a heavy squat followed by jumping, or a heavy snatch followed by explosive med ball throws, or pressing and then medicine ball slams, or chest presses, with a medicine ball.
And you're supposed to be better. Like the post-activation potentiation is you do that warm-up workout. I wouldn't call it a warm-up workout. You do something pretty tough, and then you go do something similar, and you actually get a performance boost. Is the idea?
Yeah, that's the idea behind that, and it happens. And there's a guy, you guys might remember, Ben Johnson, the infamous sprinter from Canada that got popped for steroids, and I can't remember what year was it 84?
88, Seoul.
88, okay. Yeah. So, and Charlie Francis was his coach, but I remember hearing that he was doing, literally within minutes before him stepping on the track, he was either doing very heavy cleans or heavy squats. He would just kind of get primed, and then he'd walk right out to the track and go.
Wow.
And I've seen that, I'll sometimes do that in a rowing machine. Like yesterday, in fact, I was at the gym, I was doing deadlifts. It was like, moderately heavy for me. It was 415 for a triple, and then I went into pentajumps. And so I went jump, 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 and I would do a bunch of sets of that. And I like that. That gives me that sort of activation. But, and then I do a little bit of the bodybuilding hypertrophy stuff where I'm doing curls and, the chest press and flies and that type of stuff. It just so I mix it up quite a bit so I can hit all those areas basically. And then I like for cardiovascular stuff, I don't do a lot of long, slow, steady state stuff. It's just I don't have time and I don't enjoy it. And at 240 pounds, I don't want to be running for miles. It's just not fun for me. So I might get on like an Airdyne bike and just go as hard as I possibly can, all out, 15, 20 seconds, because that's really all you can sprint for. You run out of, that CPK switch system shuts off and you can't sprint faster. You just kind of automatically slow down. And then I give myself enough recovery so that I can do it again at that same level of effort or very close to it. I don't like the Tabata where I go all out and then I rest insufficiently and then I can't go all out again. I like to go all out. And so that's been my philosophy.
Love it.
For that.
I did a show with Dr. Craig Marker, who was a leader in this scene, and he wrote a beautiful article called Hit versus Hurt. And hurt is high intensity repeat training, the indication that you rest enough and your work effort is short enough that you can truly deliver an explosive effort. And I'm so used to, being in the endurance scene, the triathlons, we're out there training all day and we're doing, 6 times 3 minutes on the running trail with only a short rest in between each thing. And by the end, you're toast. Yeah. And, we don't realize now, but I think, my concession to aging is that you don't want to be out there trashing your body with these crazy workouts that maybe you once did in your 20s because they aren't really physically healthy for the body.
Yeah, I certainly prescribe. I haven't heard that term hurt before, but that's pretty much in a nutshell describes what I do. And I like it. I think it's, I just like being able to, I call them like chainsaw sprints. I pretend like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre guys behind me, and I'm sprinting, going as fast as I possibly can.
On the Airdyne bike?
On the Airdyne
just
bike.
Making that noise, deafening the whole room.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I had some of the regular home models, and I broke 2 or 3 of them because I was going too hard. I finally got a commercial model at the house, and so I don't break the machine. So
they need to get you the right one, man.
Yeah.
Well, if you're training for 1 minute 15, or maybe up to a 6-minute event, if you broaden your scope, but your record's at the minute 15 mark. What kind of workouts preparing for that? Is this a lot of short sprints?
So right now, as funny as it sounds, there's I'm sure you're familiar with the SAID principle, the specific adaptation to impose to man. So you do what you train for. So right now, I've only got, I think, February 9th I'm competing, so that's about 2.5 weeks from now. So I'm doing basically the event every day.
Oh, really?
And working on getting faster and faster. And when I broke my world records, that's the exact same thing I did. In fact, I sat there and broke the world record like 10 times in a row because I had it. And then I went back tomorrow and took another 0.3 of a second off, and I kept doing it until I finally hit, my threshold. I got burned out at that point, but that worked for me pretty well. And I wouldn't, you can't do that year round, but I think for this short period of time, that works for me. I wouldn't recommend it for everybody, but particularly when I'm limited on time, I know exactly what I'm going to be doing. And what it does is builds confidence because I know, like I just did this yesterday. I might take a day off, but I just did this 2 days ago. I know I have the capacity to do this. So it's a little bit of a mental relief. And I like I said, there's nothing like doing your event to train for the day. And I know it goes against some of the other training philosophies, but for my specific goal, I set world records doing it that way, so it must work, at least for me.
Well, it's no impact. So
right.
It's not like a quarter miler doing it over and over. I couldn't imagine, doing running like that.
Right. And the other thing I would, and just to go back to the diet, I have noticed a tremendous recovery capacity with this. Not like anything I've ever seen before in my own personal life. So, for instance, there was a 1-minute world record, which I had set. It was like 400, at the time it was like 400 and I want to say 8 meters in 1 minute. And I went down, I knew I was going to do it that day. And I got 410 meters. And I was happy, but I was kind of pissed because I thought, I know I can do better than that. And so I was kind of really pissed at myself. So I literally, went upstairs, I took a shower, I ate a steak, I waited about 3 or 4 hours, and I went back down later that day and did it again and went 414 meters. So I broke the world record twice in one day. And this isn't your body, you feel it when you do these all out. Like my heart rate will be up for an hour or 2 or 3 afterwards.
Wow.
I mean, it's extremely taxing on the body to do that. And I was like, I just recovered, and I thought that was kind of an interesting thing.
And in general, you can recover from these all-out maximum bursts. The next day you feel okay, you can do it again.
Yep, that's the weird thing about this diet. I mean, my recovery is phenomenal.
You attribute a lot of that to the diet.
Absolutely.
I mean, you have reference points from in your 30s and 40s, like you say.
Absolutely. Like even like the DOMs I would get. When I would train before, I knew if I
that's delayed onset muscle soreness for those of you at home.
Right. So I know that before when I haven't trained. In fact, because I've been training in my little horse stable I've got out here. I'm living on equipment, and I wanted to do some other stuff, so I went back to the gym I hadn't gone to in probably a year, and did a whole bunch of exercise.
Like, oh no, that guy, we can't talk because the aerodyne's going to be too loud. Okay,
right? Yeah. So I get back in there and I do a bunch of stuff I hadn't done in ages, and I mean I'm a little bit sore, but nothing like I would have had in years past, where I would be just limping around, and I've had squat workouts where I literally had a hard time walking for 3 or 4 days.
Sure, that happens to me all the time, man.
Yeah, and so now I'm like,
I got to tighten up my game, I guess.
Well, eat more meat. Yeah, but I mean, I'm just like now I'm a little bit sore, but I'm fine to train. And this is after not doing a particular exercise in probably a year.
Okay, there's my next question then. I mean, how strict would you like to see a person try this out? In terms of the exclusion of all plant-related foods, or there's a carnivore-ish term getting kicked around now. There's the nose-to-tail argument where they're saying if you're going to do this, you really got to be broad and varied. But I think you come across a little more simple and straightforward. Yeah, and so I'll talk about a couple things. So when I talk about a carnivore diet, and of course, I wrote a book called The Carnivore Diet, so I've got some liberty to sort of that's out there, and the reviews are awesome. I looked at that. How long's it been out?
It came out on November 19th. So
okay, so just hitting the streets.
Yeah, it's just pretty new.
How's the response to you?
It's been very good. I mean, there's a lot of everybody's bought it, really enjoyed it, and I wrote it with accessibility to everyone in mind. I didn't want it to be over technical. I want it to be because this may be the first exposure many people have had to it, so it's kind of like. It's a lot of philosophy. I mean, there's a lot of science in there as well. There's not like there's no science, but I mean, let's be fair. There's not a lot of carnivore diet studies you can point to. I mean, the literature is scarce, so you have to kind of extrapolate from other areas. But the response has been really good, and I've been really, really pleased with that. And hopefully, more people will kind of start a conversation. I think that's important. But when I give lectures on this, I say, a carnivore diet to me means a diet that focuses and gets its nutrition from animal sources. And what we do with the plants is we either completely eliminate or limit them to the level needed to achieve the health goal. And I think that's as simple as that. And for many people, it's all plants out. It doesn't mean that everybody has to do that. And I think it's really exciting. We've got a study coming out of Harvard University with David Ludwig looking at this coming up. And we're going to have some people in there that are fully carnivore 100%. There's going to be people that are 90 and 80%. And we'll be able to see, is there a significant difference between these people when you stratify them out? And I think that's important information. And so, It depends on the condition. Some people that have these horrible, GI inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis probably are going to need to be pretty darn strict. Some people with autoimmune diseases probably going to need to be pretty darn strict. Other people that are just treating your standard run-of-the-mill cardiometabolic disease, diabetes, obesity, probably can get away with a little less strictness. Now, again, there's a psychological component in food addictions and cravings that are kind of in the background, so we have to be able to deal with those things. And I talk about how I see that in the book. But as far as the nose to tail thing, I certainly appreciate guys like Paul Saladino and talking about that and looking at the nutrient profiles. But when I've looked at the overall population of these folks, and I've done this, and I've done surveys. I did a survey where I got 10,000 people to respond that do the diet, and I talked to them. How much organ meat are you guys eating? Because that's interesting. And about 15% of them are eating it with any frequency, where you could say, we're going to meet your nutrient needs. And but when you look at those groups, there doesn't seem to be a clinical difference between them on a macroscopic scale. Now, individually, certainly there are people that will say, I didn't feel 100% better until I included, X, Y, or Z in my diet, this supplement or this organ. And I think there may be different people in different backgrounds. So a lot of these people coming from, plant-based diets particularly tend to be maybe a little more malnourished, and maybe they need that additional boost in the beginning.
No offense.
Well, it is what it is. That's just what we're seeing. But I just kind of disagree with the notion that everybody has to do it this way, because clearly, in my experience, and quite honestly, the people that have done this diet the very longest, the people that have done it 10 years, 20 years, they're not including organ meats in their diet. They're eating basically just steak, maybe steak and eggs. And that seems to be sufficient. And I wouldn't say that they're not optimized. When we talk about optimization, you're going to live longer. I think we really start to get into this soothsaying. I don't think we have the data that can support that. And so, Paul and I are going to have a discussion on this, and I think we are. And it's like, well, what about your methionine status, or what about your home? And I'm like, Paul, we don't really have long-term outcome data that show us exactly what that means in this population. And so until we do that, and again, it's the same thing. We're never going to know. And so I come back to my original point of how are we doing, how are we feeling? Are we no longer taking our diabetes meds? Well, then yes, you're doing well. And again, my goal is to bring this to the masses, to people that, want to try it, and, maybe they can't afford the grass-fed, $20 a pound, steaks. And maybe if they're told that they have to eat liver and brains and raw kidneys to be successful, they're probably not even going to try it. So you have to sort of look at who your target audience is, and and then actually look at the results of what's happening in people. And that's what I've done. I'm looking at this from a less reverse engineer. These are the people that are having success. What could have been happening? And the sort of belief that we can make a nose to tail nutritionally complete animal and match the RDAs, which I think the RDAs are not really reflective of what's really going on. You can't really do that. If you take a cow and you stick their pancreas and their thymus and their liver and grind it up with all the other meat, and then put that out and feed it to people, they're going to be short on a number of nutrients still. So you can't make that animal happen. You'd have to have a cow with like 8 livers to get enough.
What if I take like 20 different bottles of ancestral supplements?
Well, you can do that.
Close?
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we're saying that we're following this evolutionary ancestral pattern, your cow would have to have 8 livers to reach your vitamin C requirements. So I think there has to be compensatory mechanisms, and we already know some of those exist. We know there's a glucose vitamin C co-transporter that doesn't account for all of it. There are things like carnitine, which is found in meat, which vitamin C has a role in. There are, vitamin C acts as an antioxidant. Well, guess what? We upregulate our antioxidants anyway on a low-carb diet. The bottom line is I don't have scurvy and I don't eat much vitamin C. And so there has to be something going on. I can't be setting world records in a nutrient-depleted state. I would argue
better than you were before as well.
Yeah. In fact, when I turned 50, my records when I was a 40-year-old, I broke them as a 50-year-old. So
so this masters like everyone over 40. Is that your?
Well, it's any age category. And if you look at the American records right now for like the Constitute 500-meter row, I am the fastest in every age category except for one, the 30 to 40. I'm faster than the 20-year-olds. I'm faster than the 18-year-olds.
What's up, college kids?
I'm faster than the 40-year-olds, and of course, I'm faster than everybody older than me. The only one that were able to beat me are the 30 plus category. So it's like, that doesn't point to nutrient deficiency in my view, at least.
So a simple approach that's maybe a little more user friendly to start and dabble in, and then your experience was that 30-day folly back in 2016. I mean, that would be a pretty simple ask, especially to anyone who's suffering from anything now. And my curiosity, listeners, I don't know where you stand on the spectrum, but I feel fine. I don't think I'm reactive to plants. I've eaten them my whole life. I love, I've eaten this and that. But how do I know what's my standard? I want to be better and stronger and faster. Yeah. And I don't know what I have to judge myself by because, Mia Moore, my woman, she sleeps 2 hours less than I do every night, and she's got tons of energy. So it's like maybe I am a drag ass, and I need to change my diet. That's a tough one for me.
Well, I mean, like I said, first of all, I don't think everybody needs to do this. I think that you have people out there that, I mean, they're doing great, just like you might say, and there's no reason to change.
Well, there might be. I mean,
this is a point. I mean, there is, like I know you're a competitive athlete as well, and you might say, I'm going to go carnivore for 6 weeks and measure something, and maybe you're, I don't know what you like to train with, but there's some metric you could find.
Sure, I'm going for a 400-meter time is
right.
my event.
Maybe you can knock a second off your 400-meter time, which is pretty significant. If that occurs, then you say, well, wait a minute, maybe there's something here. Is it worth it to you? Maybe like me, who thought my digestion was completely normal, and then I go on a carnivore diet, and I was like, wait a minute, I wasn't normal. I was not as good as I am now. Yeah. So there can be that sort of revelation that occurs. And then you kind of reach this sort of state where you're like, this is maybe my optimal state, and maybe I'll put some stuff back in there and see if I stay there. And then if I find something that it's, if we have particularly people have health issues, and we want to say that there's a food contribution to that. In most cases, there seems to be, particularly with all these chronic diseases, and we want to solve that problem. And, you remember the game of Clue, Clue, where you have Colonel Mustard in the library with the candlestick, who done it, right? And you've got 8 other characters and 8 other rooms and 8 other weapons. And we're trying to figure that out. It takes a while. You got to go through all the motions.
Confounding variables.
All these variables.
Like crappy scientific studies.
Right. And so if you want to simplify that, you'd have one character or maybe 2 characters, right? And then it's pretty damn quick. You solve that game real fast. And that's what you can do nutritionally. So like I said, if you've got something, you're like want to find out what the nutritional confounder is, go to all meat, see how you do, and then add something in. And if you add the spinach back in, and maybe the oxalates from the spinach are causing you to have joint pain, hey, maybe you don't need to be eating a bunch of spinach, and I think that's how that works. So 30 days is, it's short enough time that people will try it. It's long enough that many people will feel a benefit. In my personal view, I think 90 days is a better trial for most people. I think if you're not going to get a benefit within 90 days, it's probably not right for you. But I think for some people, the transition period for a lot of people is 1 to 2 months. So you might catch 70% of the people at the 1 month period. Another 30% might need that 2 month, and then if it doesn't work by 3 months, you don't get what you want out of it. Then why would you do it?
You think that's possible? I mean, that someone's going to try this and not get a benefit?
Yeah, I mean, potentially. I mean, some people, depending what their goal is. I mean, what a lot of people will say is, I'm doing it for this reason, whether it's weight loss or this particular medical reason. And what often happens is that may not change that much, but they have like 10 other benefits, right, and they stick around. Like I've seen a lot of women in particular that they don't lose a single pound, but they're like, I'm no longer depressed. My gut's no longer hurt. My menstrual cycle is normal. My thyroid is, better. I feel happy, even though I still haven't lost a damn pound. In some cases, I've gained 5 pounds. So that's occurring. There's people that, there's a lot of people that try it and they're like, I got bored, or I really missed the carbohydrates and there. But I've not really seen a lot of people where they got significantly worse. I mean, that seems to be a vast majority. And then some of that can be related to first time going into ketosis, and some people get a rash, or there's a concept of this oxalate moving around and causing rashes and joint pain. Those things happen kind of infrequently, but those two occur occasionally.
Okay, before we go, I want to hear about your sort of daily eating pattern, your favorite foods. Are you into fasting or any of the overlays like the time-restricted feeding and other popular things?
So in maintenance phase, and I'm not in maintenance phase right now. I'm trying to eat my butt off because I lost weight. Because what happens is I got so busy with work, and I wasn't able to train as much, and so I just got skinny. I dropped down from 245 to 225 in about 3 weeks. And so right now I'm eating about 5-6 times a day to try to get that back up and do it, and wrapping up my training in advance of these world championships. And I've gotten about half of that weight back. So, but normally day to day, when I'm sort of hovering at 240 and feeling good and I'm performing well, it's usually about 2 meals a day. Generally about 2 pounds of meat in the morning, 2 pounds of meat in the evening, and that's kind of my typical day. Sometimes I'll throw some eggs in there. Sometimes I'll throw a little bit of salmon in there. Sometimes I'll throw a little bit of dairy in there, depending on how I'm feeling. I'm pretty intuitive about it. I don't really stress about it. I eat to satiety. I don't let myself get hungry, and I kind of naturally just stay. My weight doesn't move. It's just, as long as I'm kind of consistent in my training and my eating, I'm just on the money. And the nice thing about that for me is I'm just full all the time. I mean, I'm satiated all the time, so I'm not worried about that. And of course, meal planning is pretty brainless. I mean, it's eating. It's like my dog. It's like feeding my dogs. They get the same food every day.
Probably feed your dogs good food.
Yeah, my dogs just all get raw meat. And my dogs literally, when it's time for them to eat, they're jumping around and panting and salivating and drooling and excited and hopping around. And I'm the same way. I'm like, I'm excited to eat this steak every single meal. And so it's not like I'm depriving myself or anything. I truly enjoy the food. And like I said, if I want some eggs, I'll throw some eggs in there or something else like that. And, when my son had his birthday, I had a piece of birthday cake. I mean, I didn't, I'm not like a religious.
Then he went into his rowing room and busted out a minute 15 all out.
No, I mean, I actually felt a little sick to my stomach. But,
wow. Yeah.
But I mean, I had it, I enjoyed it while I was eating it, but I didn't feel that great afterwards. And I did it kind of as a concession to my kiddo because he wanted to celebrate his bad birthday with him. But
you think you're more sensitive now that your diet is so clean, against a slice of birthday cake?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, your gut microbiome changes, your digestive system, what it expresses, the enzymes, the things that it's going to produce, the cell composition is going to change a little bit. It's going to respond to your demands. That's why a lot of people, it takes them a while to transition because the body has to, upregulate and downregulate things, and that takes some time for that to occur. So,
right. You hear from the plant-based eater that they take a bite of hamburger and they get sick to their stomach or whatever happens, and it's possibly a legitimate complaint that they're going to have to habituate again to nutritious foods.
Yeah. I mean, you got to transition into one diet and transition out to another one, and they're probably not, particularly if they're following the low-fat paradigm. They probably don't express as much lipase, and their gallbladder probably isn't as efficient, and a whole bunch of other things that are going on that often will come back online over time.
Tell us about this meatrx.com. Is that your operation?
Yeah, so meatrx.com is a vision that myself and my co-founder, a gal named Masa Rostami, she's a entrepreneur out of Silicon Valley. She's my co-founder and CTO. And my vision is really I think the healthcare system really is sick. And I think I've kind of likened to calling it the disease management industry. I mean, I think that's what all we're doing for the most part, outside of acute disease, acute trauma and other things. But when it comes to chronic disease, and that's what most of what healthcare addresses, it's really managing disease, putting Band-Aids on, just dealing with symptoms, placating people, more drugs, more prescriptions, that type of thing. I think that model is not serving people well, both the physicians and the patients. And so I'm trying to get into what I'm calling the health creation business. And one of the things that my thought is, to get this to the masses, it has to be accessible. It has to work, but it has to be affordable. And so we've really come up with this. So what we have is a bunch of people that have done this diet, and they're very passionate about it. Some would call them zealots, even, right? They're just proselytizing. They're talking. They're on social media. they're spending 2-3 hours a night talking to people, telling them about how wonderful it is, how they can transition. I'm like, why don't you guys, we can set you up as coaches. We train you so you're all standardized and have standardized knowledge, and then we pay you a little bit. You're not going to get rich. It's like a part-time job. It's like an Uber driver, right? We have a lot of people that would do this for free anyway. Now we're paying them a small amount. We're charging our clients incredibly small amounts to get them the support they need, the coaching they need, because we know with any sort of healthcare intervention, support always improves the outcome. And so that's kind of the vision behind this. We have a lot of other things on there. We've got hundreds and hundreds of success stories to inspire people. We've got all the research that's out there, and we're adding to that all the time, that supports this way of sort of dieting and things that are relevant to that. We've got a huge section on environment, like if you want to read about why animal agriculture can be helpful and where some of these misconceptions come from, get some of the real data out there. We've got lots and lots of recipes, and even though carnivore is just meat, but there's lots of ways to prepare meat. There's lots of different things. You can do things that make it more interesting for people. And then we have every day. I host a live video meeting, and it's on
every
Zoom,
day
every day at 9 a.m. I get in there Pacific time, and we have 30-40 people in there, and we just talk and answer questions. And now we have, evolving from that, we have additional meetings that are going on every day, all throughout the day, people from all over the world, and it's becoming more focused. Like we have a women's group, we have an over 65 group, we have people with chronic pain, we have people with addiction, emotional issues, mental health issues. We have, what are the other ones? Autoimmune. We've got and they're just growing.
Boredom. We have the boredom group. We have the athletic group.
Well, that's where we're going to evolve to. So we have a place for anyone to go that's pursuing a meat-based or mostly meat-based diet that wants support, because you are kind of lonely a lot of times. You're out there, maybe your family doesn't support you, maybe people in your community don't support you, but you've got this huge online network, and that's been more popular. It really was my co-founder's idea, and I said, well, yeah, it's okay, but it's been really popular. And it's well attended, and most of the stuff we do is for free. We charge a nominal fee for our coaching, a nominal fee for membership, and we also provide discounts. We hook people up with ranchers and producers, secure discounts for these people, kind of on a wholesale price. And so we want to bring the ranchers in. We want to develop this relationship between these people, and eventually have some political clout to where we can kind of impact what's coming down the road.
MeatRx.com. Dr. Shawn Baker, thank you so much. Keep up the great work. Go get the book, The Carnivore Diet. Hard to forget that name.
Well, Brad, thanks you. My pleasure. It's been fun.
Thanks a lot. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Thank you for listening to the show. We would love your feedback at getoveryourselfpodcast@gmail.com. And we would also love if you could leave a rating and a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. I know it's a hassle. You have to go to desktop iTunes, click on the tab that says ratings and reviews, and then click to rate the show anywhere from 5 to 5 stars. And it really helps spread the word so more people can find the show and get over themselves, because they need to. Thanks for doing it.